All right, so you guys are here for the privacy talk. I'm absolutely impressed that we've got this many people here on Sunday, the last time slot. I was sitting here thinking, I was going to tell myself mentally I'm batting cleanup, but I know I'm really the pitcher in the lineup, so that's awesome. Anyway, my name's Tim. I've been doing this stuff for professionally and greater than 15 years, and we'll leave it at that. Longer if you count all the fun stuff when I was little. Spent way too much time in school. That's actually grad school, college and up. But all that relevant. This is for Soldier of Fortran, this whole thing about, the Equifax CISO having a Bachelor of Arts and music. And there's a whole debate. You got to have an actual degree. And then there's some comments back and forth about, well, if you actually had a master's in InfoSec, then you should post it in your slide deck. And I said, asking for a friend, is that a legit thing or not? Actually, you really do have one. So that's for him. But it's not relevant to this talk. Really what's going to be relevant is the other content. I happen to be the Red Team Director at Walmart, where N equals I love my job, in case we're following this whole N thing. That's also not really relevant to this, but just that's where I work. If you like social media, follow me there. Let's get into disclaimers. There's some stuff in here that is quasi-legal depending on where you are. I'm not an attorney. I don't play one on the internet. I definitely don't play one at cons. So this is not legal advice. Your mileage may vary in your locale. Also, this is not for criminal intent. If you're doing what I'm talking about here, you're going to get caught. So if you're a criminal trying to hide, you will eventually look like this guy. Anyone know who he is? Dread Pirate Roberts, Silk Road? Okay, there we go. If there's some financial applications here and implications here. I'm not a CPA. I'm not a financial advisor. Obviously, figure that out on your own. Also, the last disclaimer really in here, all opinions are mine. They're probably wrong. And they're not necessarily my employers. Okay, so definition of total privacy. So what we're talking about here is separating your identity from your physical address. Okay, where we're trying to keep this physical address out of as many databases as possible. And this is not off the grid. That's the guys that like to live off like solar power and stuff. That's not this kind of thing. But sometimes people, when I'm talking about this, they go, "Oh, you're off the grid" or whatever. And I'm like, "Yeah, sure, whatever you want to call it." And in this case, we're talking about identity being your online persona. So this is your social media presence, your work relationships, your government records, all that good stuff. And we're talking about physical address. The way I like to phrase it is where my loved ones put their heads on their pillows at night. Right. So think of it in those terms. Also, can't be a curmudgeon. I like tech. I assume that you guys like tech too. That's why you're here. Social media is a cool thing. So we got to be able to find a way to keep using that stuff. Right? And it turns out, short version, this is very, very hard. Okay? So why would I try this? So I had an interesting experience with the Department of Justice way back in the day. That's a story for another time. It's not going to be recorded. It was a misconception. No big deal. I also am really tired of hearing colleagues and people in the industry that go around saying, we need this privacy stuff, but then they're not willing to get up off their butt and actually do the work that it actually requires to do it right. So this is like, all right, so I'm gonna actually try this out. And you've probably seen these privacy experts that are talking about privacy in one moment, and then they're like live tweeting their vacation in the next, and you're like, really? Okay, so this is a grand challenge, and I thought, yay, if anyone can do it, I can do it, because I like to take on really big dumb things sometimes and have a hard time chewing them up, right? So why not? So this is a great book. A lot of inspiration came from this book. If you've seen this book, I think a lot of times you find this for sale at a cons. I think I've even seen it like at DEF CON's bookstore before. Might even been here. But the problem with it is JJ Luna is actually a curmudgeon. He'll tell you don't use tech. Use a smartphone or use no smartphone, a dumb phone, and all this other stuff, old cars, old things. And that goes against the whole, like, I like tech and I want to keep doing it. So in his book, he's got these 4 privacy levels, which are roughly like, you got your Walter Mitty, fantasy. I'm not real, but I'm thinking about it. That's kind of your level 1. Okay. That would be the people that maybe do 1 or 2 little basic things, but that's about it. Level 2 is, hey, you're starting to really get into this thing. You're starting to use some things like aliases and whatnot, but it's still not really there. And level 3, you're kind of getting a little nuts, right? And then at level 4, you're full on Jason Bourne, okay? And this is basically, at level 4, you are committing multiple felonies because you're basically replicating the witness protection program, but you're doing it on your own without their authorization, right? So that's where that's at. So where I actually managed to get to is somewhere between level 2 and 3. I wasn't full on level 3 by far. There's a lot of things that just wasn't worth it for me, even in the process of this whole experiment. So the question is, why am I going to talk about it now, right? So I obviously did a whole bunch of stuff. I had some success with it. The question is, like, why would I burn that? And I'll tell you, it's because I'm calling it quits. I'm done with the game. It's really, really hard, as you can see, and as well, I will get into here. Okay. So, and sometimes I just like GPS tag photos. You know, like, it's one of my favorite pieces of technology. I think like 25 years from now, my kids will get to go to the exact same beach in Florida and reenact that awkward family photo, and they'll know the exact angle of the camera and the whole deal because it's all right there in the EXIF tags, right? So that's just an example. So step one, we got to come up with a plan. So we have to figure this out. Are we going to go urban or are we going to go rural? So on the plus side, so urban, let's say you go that route. Well, we've got building codes, permits, and your house plans. Those are all records. Got to figure out how to do this. All right. You'll have lots of neighbors, witnesses, and it's not witnesses like bad thing, but like there's going to be people that are going to know you, right? And there's wholesale surveillance, you know, stoplight cameras, license plate readers, things like that. There's just stuff around, all these CCTV cameras. And, you know, so I was like, okay, if I was single and I had no kids, I could probably do that urban thing. If I wanted to be a full-on criminal and go on the run, I think there's a lot of advantages going urban. I think you can kind of blend in. Especially if you look like that guy, right? You guys have all seen that, but that's not the lifestyle we want, right? And it's also a little too Hollywood. So it's like, all right, on the rural side, we've got minimal building codes, permits, plans, very few neighbors. Although, if anyone that spent any time in the rural side, your neighbors all know each other, which is really weird. I lived right next to people in suburbia, and we didn't even know first names. But then I've got people that are 3, 4, 5 miles down the road that we know. Lots more, right? So, and virtually there's no wholesale surveillance, right? You're out in the woods. The closest thing to that would be your neighbor's deer camera or something, right? So that's not really a problem. So rural it is, and keep in mind I was a city kid, so this was this is an adventure, right? So we're gonna go do this. Also, I was like, so how am I gonna do this? I got a job. I gotta keep getting paid because I like to eat and stay alive. So by this point, I've been working from home for N years, which is about 5 at the time when I started, and it's been over a decade now. Somehow I managed to been doing this. So like, all right, so anywhere I've got reliable internet phone service, not a problem. Okay. Reliable, we'll get to that in a minute. Reasonable drive to the airport. You know, I got to be able to get on a plane from time to time and go to some location. Okay, that's fine. And it turns out most employers actually don't really need to know your address. They just need a mailing address. So, and as long as you do certain things, and this is where we get into some of the legality stuff, and we'll talk about it in a minute. So step one, got to pay for it. How are we going to pay for it? Anyone got an idea? Cash. Why? Because if you go on, the easiest way to go on the grid is to do a mortgage application. Right? You're in so many different databases. In fact, as you'll see towards the end of this, when I unraveled this and I actually bought a different house with a mortgage, I suddenly started getting spam calls. I forgot how well insulated I really was. How many people were trying to like tell me the IRS suddenly thought I owed them money and I needed to give them my credit card right now over the phone. Weird stuff like that just came out of the woodwork. So again, nobody said this would be easy or cheap. So if you really want to do it, I mean, you gotta pay the piper, right? Step two, got to find land. So I need a parcel of land that has never had a house on it before. And this is important. And we'll get to it in a second. So it needs to be outside of city limits, preferably, because there's less rules, right? And it needs to be in a county that doesn't require building plans on file. Okay. So but at the same time, you know, I'm not a curmudgeon, so I got to be within decent range of what my wife and I refer to as retail therapy, right? So we got to be able to get to a store and buy real stuff. Can't go live in the woods. So long period of searching. This is probably about a year of trying to figure out exactly where in the world we're going to do this. And I eventually found this. This is actually the view from my deck, so it's got this nice, beautiful thing on the side. So here's the pluses of living out this way. But you can also see there's no people around, right? So step three, we got to figure out, okay, now we found this land, we want to buy it, and we're going to actually pay for it, and we're going to title it. So how do we do this? It turns out that if you put it in your name, that kind of ruins the point, right? So you got to title it, and what we chose to do is title it in an LLC. So we formed an LLC because we didn't want to burn the property. We did all this work to get this property. That would be really stupid to ruin it that fast. And then we had the LLC actually backstopped to a trusted attorney. The word trusted is important. And here's, again, an attorney, right? They're not easy, they're not cheap. In this case, we also needed a trusted attorney that understands privacy, because you can't just go to any old person that does whatever. They're going to kind of go, what? And then they're going to mess something up that's very subtle. So we found a friend. We read him in on the game, on the whole experiment. And he said, okay, you're nuts, but I'll do it. And he drew up a trust as well, right? And this is kind of important because the LLC is actually owned by the trust. Okay, the trust connects you to your identity, which is great. So you have this nice little thing. We buy land. The land is titled to the LLC. The LLC is backstopped by an attorney, literally all mail to the owner, blah, 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 blah. It goes to the attorney's office. The attorney then knows in his records that this is owned by the trust, and the trust is mine. I'm the trustee. So that's how that works out, right? This is insulation. Nothing of this is illegal. This is all legit. It's just complicated stuff. So, yes, .gov could compel the attorney to say who really owns this property, but Joe Schmo that says, hey, I don't like whoever this is, or I want to go sue this person or whatever, and then you want to find a name to name a plaintiff or name a defendant, it's really, really hard to do that, right? My attorney happens to be a very big constitutional libertarian, so he would always come back with a warrant, right? So that was also part of the whole finding a good trusted attorney, right? So, by the way, repeat this with your cars. Also, side note, different LLCs for the cars, because if you find the car and they associate the car with you and they go look at the LLC, then it's all burned. So preferably different LLC for each car, right? Also paying cash, no loans, right? Likewise for cars. And like I said, it has to be a different LLC than the house, okay? So then step 4, we got to have a mailing address, because people still like to send you stuff and people think you need to have an address. So we boiled this down to UPS store versus P.O. Box. If you read J.J. Luna's book, he's actually got other options in there, some like hiring somebody or working out an agreement with somebody to let you drop their mail there. Some of them are quasi-legal. Some of them are like, just kind of awkward. So we decided we're going to go with the other one of these two. So comparing the two, P.O. Boxes, you can't get FedEx or UPS. Guess what? Dead in the water right there. But there's a couple more reasons why you don't want to go this way. There's more identity paper trail on the P.O. Box side because you're dealing with government. So there's more laws. Not just that, but you definitely cannot use your P.O. Box on your driver's license. So Department of Homeland Security has a list of databases, has a database for all this stuff. And the DMV, when you go down to go get your driver's license, that's all there. It's cross-checked. And so UPS store, on the other hand, can take all deliveries, so all services. So that's good. There's less identity requirements. They still require, certain things like, they want to see a driver's license or whatever, right? We'll get to that in a second. But it's private sector, so there's less laws involved, just in general. You're not supposed to use a UPS store mailbox for your driver's license, but, again, quasi-legal here. What addresses do celebrities and rich and famous people put on their driver's license? Do you think they're going to follow the little laws about, oh yeah, this is my, I'm Brad Pitt and I want you to come troll me? No, they're going to do certain things like this. They're going to buy additional properties, or they're going to insulate it in some way. And it turns out, so we said, UPS store. So we got to actually set this address up, right? So while we're there, here's what you need to do. Go while your driver's license has your old address, obviously, right? Like, don't go ever touch your new address on the driver's license and then go register, because that's kind of moot point, right? So, and a pro tip is use a passport. This is awkward, but passport is government issued ID. It doesn't have your address on it. It doesn't have a lot of characteristics about you on it. It has less info in general. Just make sure you understand the pretext behind it, because while it satisfies the DHS requirements, you're going to say something like, hey, I'm moving and my driver's license is in a box. This is all I've got. Can I just sign this up? And they'll just like, okay, you're weird, but yeah, sure. Pay cash for the mailbox. Don't do credit cards, right? Same reason. And do 1 year at a time. You get better discount that way, and it's oh, okay, he's a long-term customer. Great. And then start getting your W-2s, your credit cards, your e-commerce shipments, everything shipped there. So, okay, we got this address, we got some property, we got the installation set up now, but there's nothing on the property. I don't plan on living in a tent for the rest of my life, so we got to build a house, right? So, again, cash. Cash is king in this. Then we got to figure out, how in the world am I going to get this contractor that's going to build this house? Because I have a day job. I'm not going to build a house and do this, right? So the question is, do I read in this contractor into this whole game, or do I keep him in the dark? This is very questionable, right? We chose to go with a contractor we trusted, who's a friend, and we briefed him. Again, he said, you're crazy, but I'll take your money. So but contractors don't do all the work themselves. They got subs. And so the question is, do you read the subs in or not? And we decided, you know what? No, not going to tell you guys, because you know what? All you're really do is you're going to show up, you're going to do your work, you're going to get paid, and you're going to go home, and you don't really care. All they really need is knowledge of roughly where it is. And as far as neighbors concerned, this property was picked because we could put in a half-mile driveway and put a big gate on the end of it, right? So neighbors are looky-loos kept away. So during the construction process, we had looky-loos drive their old pickup trucks down, and what y'all doing down here? But we didn't have that problem after we put the gate up, obviously. By the way, don't put this gate up unless it fits with the area, right? Because you have this gate, they're going to like, whoa, there's something interesting back there. And you definitely don't want to put this gate up, because then you're going to be like, there's definitely something weird going on back there, and you're going to have some three-letter agencies visit you. So you probably want something more like this, like when in Rome, do as the Romans, right? So we also, on our gate, we left it unmarked. There's no address on it. This is actually interesting because the country misnumbered, or the county, excuse me, misnumbered our property address, which would have been really cool. If we had put a mailbox out there, they would have realized that was a big bad mistake, because the house number was actually a mile down the road, and then like where it would have been, where that number should have been. So we thought, hey, this is even more fun, because now we got this extra layer of insulation, right? So if somebody does figure out the house number, they're going to be looking a mile down the road. So eventually we met, entertained several neighbors, and we decided, you know what, we're not going to tell them about this whole game project, whatever experiment thing, because they already think we're weird. So we're just going to not talk to them about that, and they're not likely going to post anything online. A lot of them really don't do the internet for very much of anything, and maybe they text their friends, but that's in Facebook, but that's about it. So next big question, we're starting this house project. We got to get utilities out there, right? Because I'm not going to live like it's 1800. So electric, we had this installed prior to the house being complete, and it makes sense, right? Because you're going to have contractors, they're going to have power tools, they need electricity. So therefore, there was no address, just the legal property description. This is interesting. City people like me don't realize that properties don't all automatically have addresses until there's a house on it. And then you actually request the address to be put there, which a real estate agent did. Thank you. But it was, again, a mile down the road and wrong. So what we did is we said, hey, bills, send your bills to this mailing address, which is the UPS store. And they just had this rough address. And, you know, in post-build, we got this nice little form letter from them that said, hey, we noticed your address is incorrect. Please update it. Anyone guess what I did? Ignored it. So it turns out that if you're, you know, paying your bills on time, they don't care. The squeaky wheel gets the oil, right? So we're not the squeaky wheel. Just ignore us. So the electric company doesn't have an actual address. Now, granted, we know that they know where their power poles are, because if a power pole goes down, they know they've got them all numbered. They know how to get, you know, whatever. That's not the issue. The issue is our address isn't in their database. So if they got breached, that address is not floating around out on BitTorrent or whatever. So for water, we're in a rural location. There was no water service, so we needed a well. So that means subcontractors. So we hired this well driller, and all they really wanted to know is how to get there. They didn't care. There wasn't really a house done yet either. So same deal. They drilled the well before the house was done, and we paid them through the general contractor. No big deal. Sewer, same deal. Subcontractor, no big deal. Gas, there's no gas lines out there, so we had to use propane. This is interesting because the propane people said, we want a credit check. And so I was like, no. So we had the general contractor just say, hey, we'll pay cash for the full amount to fill up the tank. Will you come out here? And he basically said, we're behind in this project. We really got to get this going. And the owner of the house is out of town on vacation for a while. It's going to really stall the project. Will you please come on out? And they said, sure. So trash. We found a small business. They wanted a deposit and they wanted an address. So here's a standard response. Sorry, we don't get mail there. And we don't have an actual address for the property. We have, you know, I'll give you a mailing address. And then I said, I'll give you rough directions on how to meet us there. So literally, we had the trash guy meet us at the property the first time. And by the way, here's my mailing address for how you actually send me invoices. And pro tip, you know, you might maybe be able to use a pseudonym, and they may not really care as long as you pay them, right? So, first OPSEC rule, I'm going to talk about OPSEC in a little bit, but the first rule is anything that has our address on it, that's a tie to our identity in any which way, shape, or form, does not end up in this, what we refer to as city trash. We burned all that. That's one of the interesting things about living out in the sticks. We can do that. So the bad part is I had to drop the trash off at the end of the driveway on the other side of the locked gate. That's a half mile. That means you're either carrying it down or it's in your car. Not fun. So for phone, we said, you know what, we're just going to stick with 4G LTE. We can get it out here, get good enough signal, and we'll use our mailing address. Yes, the phone company can triangulate. Yes, that's interesting. If we were criminals, that would be a problem, and we would do burners, and we would have different burners for at the house that never were powered up anywhere else, and we would have a different burner for in town that we never powered up and took there. We had the battery out before. I mean, get all that, but that's not, well, that wasn't our point. We thought that was like beyond, reasonable. So, JJ Luna in his book says, hey, you can pay somebody else to manage your phone plan. I did that for a while. Or I would be on a relative's phone plan. We just do it that way. Decided not to even mess with that anymore. It's not worth it. Internet. This crowd. Yeah.
The electricity, going back.
Yeah.
How did you handle billing payment for that?
The mailing address. Just gave them a mailing address in town. They don't really care. So they say property at blah, 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 blah. They have a legal description of where the property is, and they don't really care. I gave them checks that issue the checks. Good question. Which have the mailing address on the check. Yeah. So for internet, we tried satellite for a while, and actually satellite's way better now than it used to be. Exceed and the Viasat has decent satellites up there, and you can actually do certain things better, but the latency was just too much. So we switched to fixed wireless, and we actually installed a 50-foot tower. And we're out where I'm at. Yes, this is commitment, people. I have a 50-foot tower, but it's not tall enough where I have to have the red blinky lights and have all the regulations around it. It just needs to be taller than the trees, and it points out to another tower that's like 3, 4, whatever miles, so many miles away, and line of sight over the trees. That was good enough, by the way, for 50 milliseconds to Google, and that was kind of the point. So the ISP obviously knows where this actual tower is, of course, so they can support us, but they have a mailing address, and again, we pay them on time. And you know what? They love us because they deal with customers out in rural areas, as you might imagine, that don't pay their bills very well. So the only thing they've got is our mailing address, and of course, they know how to fix their stuff. And again, rough driving directions for installation. Go down this road, blah 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 blah. Roughly, we'd say 3 to 6 miles. I might know it's exactly 4.2 or whatever the distance is. That's not the real distance. But I'm not going to tell them, right? That's not the point. We want to give them, drive down here and make a left, and I'll meet you at the road, right? Right by the gate. So, yeah, I spend more than $200 a month for 6 up, 6 down. It hurts. But I get 50 milliseconds to Google, and we actually can get work done. There's one other, yeah. It is, however, most of those are limited. And so there are some things around it. If I was staying at this property for too much longer, I'd imagine that would eventually be what I switch to. That's a good question. For homeowners, this is the one database where the house address and my name are actually tied together. The underwriter, as we're setting this policy up, said, why does your mailing address not match the house address? Well, it's really simple, because it's rural and we don't get mail there. Oh, okay. Guess what? This conversation happened like 4 or 5 times. A different underwriter would call me a couple weeks later, like, yeah, we're working on your policy, and then we noticed the addresses don't match. Like, yeah. Just get to the point where like, oh, I'd cut them off because we don't get mail there before they'd even finish. Oh, okay. And eventually the policy's written. That's fine. So this leads us to OPSEC, and this is the hard part, right? So notice the subtitle, Briefing the Family. So it comes time to move in, and I hate moving, and every time I've ever moved, I've said I'm getting a mover next time, and then this time we're like, no, this is part of the whole experiment. We're going to do it ourselves, right? Yay. So kids, this gets interesting really quickly. Kids, you can't tell your friends where you live. Yeah, you're not abducted, though. We're your real mommy and daddy. It turns out this is harder the older they are. The younger they are, it's pretty easy. They're like, just 2 or 3, they don't care. Eventually, kids get older and they want to start playing with friends or whatever. So for adults, we say, hey, you know what? Use your mailing address for everything. And by adults, I already know this, so that means my spouse. You need to use your mailing address for everything. And that's not always fun. Sometimes we run into people that will absolutely say, we must have your physical address. I asked my attorney, they don't. So what we do is, the 99% of the time where they don't need that physical address, we just tell their little itching ears what they want to hear. This is my address. And then I give them the mailing address. Notice I didn't say this is my mailing address. I said this is my address. I never lied. I just know that you're not smart. So, and it satisfies them. On that note, actually, Kohl's department store canceled my wife's credit card because they knew that it was not our physical address, and I shed a single tear for that. So, for when it comes time for parties, I say, hey, please entertain them somewhere else if you can, and that obviously didn't work. So, when entertaining, carefully word the driving directions. Travel down X, blah 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 miles, turn left, and then by the way, there'll be a temporary landmark by the gate. Like balloons for the gate. Why a temporary landmark? Because you can remove it. And in your city friends, all trees look the same. All rural gates look the same. They don't remember how to get there. Sometimes I have to meet them and escort them in and out. So this obviously requires a bit of social engineering, and this gets old. Registering to vote's a gray area. If you get your property, what you really want to do is try to find a way to get your property and your mailing address somehow in the same precinct so that there's less of an issue. It turns out ours wasn't. So we decided, maybe we should just abstain from some things. So it depends. This is another sign. No one said this would be cheap or easy. This takes a real commitment. No deliveries to the house, period, except for all the deliveries you have to to the house. So usually we say, my address is blah, that's the mailing address, but please deliver to, and you give directions. And companies don't like doing this except for they like to get paid, so they will do it. So we say, again, drive X miles, turn, call this cell number, we'll meet you at the road by the lock gate. And they hate it, and it's confusing, and I usually have to repeat it like 8 times, but it works every time. And so again, it's part of the whole process. All e-commerce deliveries to the UPS store. Guess what? Pickup hours are up until 6 p.m. and at 4 on Saturdays and not at all on Sundays. So yeah, you do that, plus it's a 25-minute drive for me. That's not convenient, right? So if you got that neat little fast shipping the next day, same day, 2-day delivery, whatever, it really kind of doesn't matter anymore. It's just a pain that you just have to deal with. Yeah. No, not at all. Yeah, the question was, you're going to mail every day. Yeah. Credit cards to the mailing address. All the credit cards, all banks, everything went to the mailing address. So that's not a problem. It's all consistent. That's really the thing that they care about. From a tech perspective, obviously you want to disable GPS EXIF tagging. So like, this was interesting. So the beginning, it was like, we would turn this off and on for vacations. So when it comes time to leave, I would say, here, honey, give me your phone. What are you doing? Hold on. No. And when when the plane would land, we'd literally, give me your phone. No, just give me your phone. Here you go. And we're back. And it's backing off. Now we get the neat little GPS tagging, but you have to remember to do it. Also, location tracking in all apps, which I know this crowd knows this. That probably means iOS, not Android, at least until like KitKat, right? We didn't even have that functionality on the Android side. And I'm just not a fan of the Android side when it comes to privacy. iOS to me is way better, even with iCloud stuff, right? So, register your Internet of Things, your smart toaster, to some other address. Disposable emails and something else and fake names. Obviously, that's not anything new to you guys. And then we did VPN all of our traffic for a while to obfuscate our source IP, which is cool, except for then you don't get localized search results. And like you say, hey Google, what movies are there? Well, in San Jose, like, I'm not in San Jose. So we eventually just stopped doing this because of this whole, when we switched to ISPs and everything, it turns out that they were just obfuscating it kind of generically for us anyway. It was in the big college town that was, a half-hour drive away. So it didn't matter. It wasn't close enough, and that was fine. And then you get your local searches back. We decided against GPS jamming. Seriously considered it, looked into it, figured out I was within my wheelhouse of capability. I decided not to do it because it just wasn't worth it. Because you know what? I would rather just vet who comes over. And by the way, there's a couple of knuckleheads that I told them, you take that off of Facebook right now. And why do you tag all of your pictures at my kid's birthday party or whatever it might be? Most map apps don't have aerial photos of the house, or they didn't at the time. And this is really great. So aerial photography is definitely improved for urban areas. They pass multiple times, maybe once a year or even more often in some cases. But in the rural areas, it did not. So satellite imagery, out where we were is out of date, right? Which is a great thing. So one of the rules we had is never put anything near the house as a destination, or either leaving from or going to as a landmark. So we'd literally say, okay, when you get, and tell my wife, when you get to this intersection, you may then turn apps on, the map app on, and then tell them where you want to go if you want directions. That way it's always start and stop from there. But the apps have ways of collecting your information anyway. It would still, you'd go out someplace and you'll say, hey, you're N minutes from home. And like, how's it figure that out? Well, it's because you put it on your charger at night and it doesn't move and it knows you're sleeping. So it assumes that's probably where you live, right? So bandwidth is expensive. This is another interesting tech side, right? It turns out I can't stream 3 shows at 4K resolution simultaneously and still work. And WebEx is usually the thing that breaks, not that. So it's like we're going to batch schedule stuff. So it's kind of like old school tech. I'm sitting here thinking, okay, I got this new whatever. I'm going to download this ISO off MSDN. It's going to happen. I'm going to schedule it for 11 p.m. or whatever it might be. You just had to think like this, which is really funny. Johnny Long, if you've ever heard him do his talk about living in Africa, he's like, I relate. I shouldn't have to relate, but I do. So the chase. So at one point we decided we're going to have this table stakes game where basically it's bragging rights and a steak dinner. So I brought a bunch of hacker friends, some technologists, some people that had law enforcement affiliations, and we said, all right, this is not CBS's The Hunted. This is not active recon, okay? But it's passive surveillance. You can do data mining. No violation of any laws, please, especially the ones that would get me in trouble with law enforcement agencies. And my kids are off limits. That was pretty much the rules, right? One of them contacted a DE agent friend, and that particular friend said, yeah, I give up on the terms of passive. Now, he could have found me active, right? Like you go to the mailbox where all this mail is going and sit on it and wait till I show up and just follow me home, right? It's not hard. But for passive, that was pretty good. After several months, a friend named Danny sent me this text message, and I looked at it, and I recognized 2 things. One, I knew that I hadn't mowed out there in a while, and the grass is really, really tall, and that was about right. And 2, it was getting to be twilight, and that matched the picture, and I was like, what in the world is this? This is recent. This is hitting home. They're getting close, right? Like you imagine the little depth charges. That one was too close to the submarine, right? So it turns out a friend posted birthday party details for one of my kids on Facebook. I did not know it. And that friend had lax privacy. But guess what? Even though you got a hold of this picture, and by the way, there's some good social engineering. He went and contacted this kid who posted this information and said, hey, I'm from the internet. Would you like to get on your motorcycle and ride 25 minutes out in the sticks to this weird place in the gate that you've been to before and take a photo? And this kid says, sure, sounds legit. and does it, right? The cool thing is he had an old Android phone that didn't GPS tag the photos. So when he got the photo back, I was like, neener, you did all that work and you still don't have GPS. So weeks later, Danny finally found an aerial map. He found out there's a third-party map service that actually had some black and white aerial photography, which was kind of cool. And I shamed him at this point, and I said, there's another app that actually has aerial photography that you need to find inside of 5 minutes, or I'm just going to forever, frown on you. And he found it. Anyway, so this is the property. This is what we're talking about, the half-mile drive and way back in the middle. And you can see with all the woods like it was, for the longest time, all the aerial photography just had all those woods. There was nothing really clear to see. And when he did roughly hone in on the area where it was, he was sending me aerial photography of neighbors up to like 4 miles away. Is this your property? No. Well, I don't see any other places that have half-mile driveways. And I'm like, yep. So, but he never got an actual street address. After all of that, he figured out where it was, got legal descriptions of properties and stuff like that, but never figured out an actual street address for the property. So now what? So while we've enjoyed the natural beauty of living out in the sticks, and these are all from my place, right? It's a really gorgeous area. We have decided that we like local amenities and smart apps and fast bandwidth and cheap bandwidth for that matter. And immediate gratification of same-day deliveries, and Walmart.com grocery delivery. There you go. So all that kind of stuff. So am I jaded? Probably pretty jaded at this point. So the question is privacy even possible? Yes, if you pay cash for your real estate. If you don't pay cash for your real estate, don't even try. That's the first rule. Yes, if you choose the right location. If you go in the wrong location, there's going to be this massive paper trail of building permits and house plans and all this other stuff. Yes, if you're single or if your spouse is committed. This is kind of a big deal. I somehow tricked her into doing this, and she went along with it for the longest time. By the way, a little detail that I left out of this, that means like surveillance detection routes. So when you drive home at night and a car is following you, you keep going past the driveway until you don't see the headlights, and then you turn around and you come back. That was the rule, just for the fun, right? Yes, if nobody visits you and you're a hermit. So if you want to be a Unabomber, you can pull this off. That's not me. Yes, if you have no kids or your kids are little, probably you can do it. I think the older the kids get, the more interaction they have with friends, the less likely you're going to be able to pull this off. And yes, if your spouse lets you manage their smart things, their phones, like the honey, here, give me that. So, and yes, if you can tolerate massive inconvenience. As you can tell, there's lots of inconvenience, especially a half-mile drive with stinking trash in your car every week. And yes, if you can tolerate driving a half hour to closest retail, right? I mean, this is the kind of the deal that we had to do. Maybe we could have gotten a little closer, but it would have been harder. So, with that. And what's that? Missouri. Yeah. I'm the privacy god. I'm nuts. Yeah. Yeah. The prior DOJ experience. Another question in front of the time. Yeah.
How long did you do this for?
This was 5 years. 5 years. Yes.
If you didn't own, how would you change the approach?
If I didn't own, if you rent, read J.J. Luna's book. He's got options for renting, and he actually recommends renting until you can own for doing that kind of thing. Yeah.
I've been renting and paying cash without my name associated with an apartment for the past 5 years in 3 cities.
There you go.
Because it's easier.
Yeah. If you're doing that, I was told by a former law enforcement guy that if you're doing that, you look like one of two things. Either a criminal or you look like you're in witness protection. So, same difference. Yeah.
You mentioned buying land that has never had a house on it before.
Yes.
Does that apply to other things, like do you have to buy a car, like either from an individual or
No, I buy cars straight out. Yeah, an interesting thing about the cars. If you buy the car, be careful about the mailing address and the tax implications. For example, if you live out in the sticks, you're probably not going to have city sales tax on the car, right? So if you title it to the mailing address, which is in the city, you're probably going to be paying the city sales tax. If you're okay with that, that's fine. If you want to get that city sales tax back, you got to be really creative, or find a friend with a trailer park that will let you put up a mailbox in their thing, so you have a third address, allegedly. No issues titling. No issues titling. Yeah. I still own the property at the moment. That's a good question.
By property, you mean the house, did you burn it down?
I did not burn the house down. Yeah. It's a Faraday cage. I walked it. You've seen that movie, right? Over. Yeah. LLC was registered in Missouri. The name attached to it was the attorney. Yep.
my wife is a teacher. I was wondering if there's anything about public data that's associated with that.
Great question. If you're dealing with teaching, you're dealing with public schools, you're dealing with public records. I don't know how much you could really get around that. You really, again, like if you want to get into some of these nuances, an attorney is a friend, right? Any other questions? Yeah.
So now that you're putting out, what's your plan for the property and the various LLCs?
Let the LLCs expire over time. Sell the property after my new house is ready, and GPS tag everything and live tweet my entire life, apparently. So that would be it. Yeah.
So because of all this process that you went through with the address on the property and not actually being in the databases, do you anticipate any problems in the sales process?
No, because we've retitled it back. Titling back's easy. It's not a big deal. In fact, so if you try to find me now and you go, haha, I know where you are now, I'll say, shame on you. It was really easy as of April because I actually restructured some stuff in order to purchase another house. So that's, yeah, it's already out there. You can find me if you wanted to. Yeah, if you could have found me before April this year, then I would have been like, let's talk. Yeah.
How would you have found you?
I told you how I would have found me. I would have done it active. I would have just sat there on the mailbox. I would have gone to the UPS store and said, here's $100. Tell me when this guy shows up. Just call me at this number when this guy shows up and tell me what he was driving and which way he went. Yep.
Were you doing the same job all that time? And you were at Walmart while you were building your house? And all
No, switched. Yeah. Oh, yeah. They're longer than, yeah. No. No. Good questions. Yep.
Can you say something about what it was like when you started moving off of this? And you mentioned that
The first real big wake up call to how insulated I was when I bought this other house, the number of people that started calling my burner number. I have a different phone number that was, for external, whatever. I just throw it to voicemail. The number of people that started calling that was unreal. It shot up like 100-fold. The amount of mail I started getting went up massively. It was like, wow, I forgot all about this. Yeah, that was the biggest shock for me so far. No. So we thought mail go to the mailing address, but it would be like, it wasn't that big of a deal. So now it's like, hey, we can save you money on your whatever insurance. We can save you money on your mortgage. We can refinance your this. And it was like, the stuff that I think everybody gets all the time, I didn't realize, like you just get it and it's just noise and you just grow accustomed to it and you just kind of tune it out and you just take this trash, or take the mail and go straight to the trash with it. I think probably 99% of the mail that comes to this new address is just straight up trash. It just goes straight in. And I had never realized, I had forgotten about that. Right. Yep. I have outstanding credit. Thank you. Nothing. Yeah. What parts did I keep? No. The half-mile driveway for the trash, please. Really, that's my favorite. And especially when it's like, you forget and you realize the trash guy comes at this time, and I've got a status call, and I'm looking down. Oh, man, I don't want to go do this right now. I got to go get it. I've actually been on work calls driving my trash down. Yep. Oh, what? With the what? Done the ATV. I did that. Did Jeep. I did a bunch of different things. It still all stinks. It's still all trash. It doesn't matter. Yep. These are good questions. Yeah. Yeah. Have you ever burned a diaper? The question is, why don't you burn all of your trash? Some stuff doesn't burn. There's glass and there's metal and there's other things. We tried burning diapers. You can do it if you can sustain like 1,000-degree temperatures for like an hour. That's another talk. All right. Yeah. That's it. All right. Thanks for coming. I'm really surprised and grateful for the turnout. And thank you guys for coming. Yep.